The English game was rocked this week by the sudden passing of Worcestershire left-arm spinner Josh Baker. Baker, though just 20, had already made 47 senior appearances for the county and last season scored the run that sealed Worcestershire's promotion back to the top flight. Baker was in action for the Worcestershire second team the day before he passed away, taking 3 wickets against Somerset. Worcestershire Chief Executive Ashley Giles said, "The news of Josh's passing has left us all devastated. Josh was much more than a teammate. He was an integral part of our cricket family. We will all miss him terribly. All our love and prayers go out to Josh's family and friends." Hello and welcome to the Wisden Cricket Weekly Podcast. I'm Yas Rana, and with me today are Katya, Witney, Ben Gardner and Jim Wallace. Jim, it's your birthday. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
And
I couldn't think of anywhere better to be. When the text came in, I cleared the non-existent plans and made my way here.
Line buck straight in.
Bit late.
I hope you don't mind me divulging your age. So you're turning 35.
Turned now, yeah.
And with that in mind, the trivia question for today's show is to keep in mind for the end of the episode is 4 players have scored 1,000 test runs in their 36th year of existence. Who are those 4? Something to...
None of them are me.
Not yet.
Not yet.
We'll kick off with the PCA survey that has attracted several headlines over the last couple of days. So the Professional Cricketers Association, which is effectively the body that represents players in England and Wales, released the findings of a player survey they did ahead of the season. And I know there's a lot of scheduled chat, and we've had a lot of scheduled chat before, but this is as damning and probably as united a front I've seen the players make. So the PCA met with the players of all 18 counties before the season and found that 81% of them are saying that the schedule causes them concern from a physical perspective. 2/3 are saying it creates an environment not conducive to high performance. 76% say that the schedule causes safety concerns around travelling, especially around the blast, with late finishes and several back-to-back games. And 62% say it prompts concerns from a mental well-being perspective. There aren't enough chances to get away from the game during the season. Former England captain Joe Root said, "I'm extremely passionate about county cricket, and it is apparent the schedule needs to change for a host of reasons to see long-lasting benefits for English cricket. I'm fortunate to play a significant part of the season for Yorkshire this year, and looking at the fixture list from a physical, well-being and high-performance angle does cause me concern. County cricket is the breeding ground for some of the best talent in the game, and this requires world-leading structures to allow players to reach their full potential. This is a benefit for everybody in the game. Having space to recover, prepare and improve your game during the season is crucial, and the creation of minimum standards to protect travel windows and player welfare is non-negotiable." Ben, there's a lot going on there, but what caught your eye and what do you think is most significant from those PCA findings?
It's funny because this is just the latest in a line, really, of warnings from professional cricketers, and this is the thing that they are most united on whenever you speak to them. They'll have different opinions about lots of things, but the one thing that they all seem to agree on is that this can't go on. And we had similar warnings at the start of the season, and now this survey sort of backed it up, so it is truly game wide. But you had representatives of players who were voicing these concerns. So I don't think any of it comes as a huge surprise, but I guess it is good that they just really lay out some of the details around what they mean when they talk about it being unsafe, because there are some county fans who will look at it and think, firstly, you're paid to play cricket for a living, so kind of get on with it, and also look at it and think like, well, it's a T20 match, it's 3 hours long, you're doing 6 hours work across a weekend, what's the issue? And then actually just think like, no, actually there's so much more that goes into it, and the travel is a good example of that. The fact that there are players who are having to, because if you just think about all the practicalities of what it takes to play a cricket match, sure, you've got the 3 hours between when the first ball is bowled to when the winning run is hit or whatever, but then you've got to kind of get back in the change room, you've got debriefs, you've got ice baths, whatever, you've got you've got to get your kit together, you've got all that to sort out, you've got maybe celebration, you've got a good game, who knows, and then you've got to get in your car and back home, and this all can happen quite late at night, and then you've also got to the next day when you get into the ground, it's not just that you get there for you want to warm up at some point, you want to do some practice ideally, all that stuff that goes into it that just makes it like some of these turnaround times are just crazy. Like there's a couple
It's worth actually spelling out just how packed that particular bit of the summer is. The blast bit from the end of May to mid-July. You got 14 blast games plus 2 rounds of the county championship in a 7-week period, and there are specifically some very tight turnarounds that the players are particularly unhappy about.
Yeah, but then there are, and it's probably worth outlining what those are. But also some of the issue is just that this is the thing that's tricky, is there are so many different stakeholders in this who all have different priorities. Like you might think that the counties and the county players are aligned on this, but they're kind of not really. Like counties want to play across the weekend basically. So Thursday to Sunday is when almost all the T20 Blast games are played. But that's what causes some of the issues, because it's some of the turnaround times when you have players who are, there's 2 examples of teams who play on, I think, either a Friday or a Saturday night and then travel to a different ground to play on a Saturday or Sunday lunchtime, which is kind of crazy when you think about what that turnaround time is. But that's something that counties kind of want. So, and then because when you see that, it's tempting to think, well, maybe if you shuffle it round a bit more, you can arrive at a solution. But that's just not really possible. I mean, Alan Fordham, who has put this together, is tearing his hair out, and I think if there's many more requests made of him, he might start complaining about his schedule. So.
Katya, what stands out for you? Because somebody emailed in making this point that if there was an obvious solution, someone would have found it by now.
Yeah, exactly. The whole point why this is kicked down the road is because there is no solution to it, and it requires everyone, like Ben said, multiple different stakeholders, everyone who has an interest in keeping the schedule packed, coming together and having a reasonable conversation with compromise on all sides. And realistically, that's not going to happen. And we talk about this every couple of months, and it keeps getting kicked down the road. We had the Strauss review a couple of years ago, and now it seems like we're headed towards some other big review that's going to happen, and try and sort it out. But there is no perfect solution. What I will say is that every workplace has safety regulations and minimum hours between work shifts. And while cricketers are there to provide entertainment, that is still their place of work, and there has to be safety regulations, and that includes minimum hours between work shifts. And there's a responsibility on the ECB as an employer to ensure that those players are safe and that they're not driving up the M1 at a ridiculous hour in the morning, having not had that much sleep and played a professional cricket game. And it's going to also impact, if this continues, it's going to impact on the quality of cricket, which was another thing outlined in that PCA report. Ben did an interview with Daniel Bell-Drummond before the season started, where he attributed a hamstring injury to the amount of cricket that he played last season. So it's, what do we want? Do we want there to be a slightly lesser quality of cricket, players in danger of being injured and grumpy about the schedule? Or do we want to try and find some compromise to work around it? And it has to happen at some point. The English cricket summer is unique in the amount of cricket and the amount of competitions that it squeezes into such a short space of time. Just outside of cricket, there are 4 competitions across the summer. What other sport requires players to play 4 competitions running concurrently or consecutively at the same time over 6 months? It is ridiculous. I don't know what the solution is. I've always said when we've discussed this, I'm very glad I'm not the one having to come up with the solution, but there has to be some kind of compromise or solution that's found, because I really don't think you can carry on like this.
Yeah, I mean, Jim, Katya alluded to the different stakeholders in English cricket wanting different things from county cricket. And something we've talked about a little bit this season is that people use county cricket for very different purposes. There were county fans out there who say 25 years ago, Ramps was playing 98 days of cricket in an English summer. Now players don't, generally, even the guys who play everything, don't play much more than 70 to 75. So they are playing less cricket. The 100 is obviously an additional competition, but actually it completely overlaps with another one. So individual players are actually still only playing 3 competitions.
Yeah.
So there is less cricket than there used to be. But county cricket is increasingly being viewed through the lens of high performance. The Strauss review unashamedly refer to it purely through that lens. Yeah. A lot of people in English cricket are probably somewhere closer to the middle. Yeah. How do you view it, and how comfortable are you with county cricket being viewed more through the high performance lens?
I mean, I think that's just the way that the game has gone and it has to be viewed in that lens. I mean, gone are the days where if you read some of those books by the old, A Lot of Hard Yakka by Simon Hughes or whatever, there's tales of players in there. They used to love getting a sponsored car because they were always in their car and they'd be smoking in the car and they'd carpool with their player. Like, those days are gone. I mean, naively, actually, when you were just chatting then, I was thinking, team coaches, are they not a thing anymore? Do they go to certain grounds, but like not to, because it is, I mean, that's it. All it's going to take is, we were sort of saying something off air, but all it's going to take is for someone to have an accident or be involved in an accident, and then it'll be, that'll be the straw that breaks the camel's back, and it'll be, we should have dealt with this matter. So it has been kicked down the road because it is tricky to get all these things in a line. My personal view is that, there's simply too much of it if we want the game to be as good as it is and people to be at the top of their performance. Then something has to give. Maybe that's, thinking off the top of my head, they alternate competitions, 1 year on, 1 year off, or there's a 2-year cycle or something like that, like a Euros or a World Cup sort of cycle. I don't know, but I mean, a lot of people will say, they played a lot more in as you've said it back in the day, but it was a different quality of cricket. It was, much less athletic, not to, insult the olden days guys, but it definitely was, and less
scrutiny as well, right? Every game is streamed now.
Yeah.
Players probably don't get away with stuff that they would have done 20 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. The scrutiny is that much more. They used to have rest days and things thrown in as well, so you could hit them back with that. But I think there has to be a compromise, and something has to give, really.
Yeah. So just I was looking for the 2-day back-to-back, which is Sussex, who play at, I think, at Canterbury, and then back at Hove Friday night to Saturday, 2:30 p.m. But then also Surrey's first 3 games of the season, so they play Thursday in Southampton at 7 p.m. and then Friday in Cardiff at 6:30 p.m. and then Sunday back at the Oval at 3:30 p.m. So that's 3 games in 4 days in 3 cities spread across quite a wide section of the UK.
There's another one. So Gloucestershire have a game in Cardiff on the Thursday, Bristol on the Friday, before travelling 270 miles to Scarborough for a 4-day game that starts on the Sunday.
Yeah. So and that again, that is part of the issue. And again, this is where the different sort of priorities come in, because actually part of the issue a bit is that the T20 Plus is now played in a block or 2 blocks, I guess, and that is actually a lot down to request from the players. I mean, the counties like it too, because it means they can get overseas players for a large chunk, rather than having to, have Dwayne Bravo in and he's sitting around and playing 1 game a week or whatever.
Yeah.
But players also like to be able to get into a format rather than, having to switch between them constantly. But it would actually, like, from a scheduling point of view, for example, if you could have like you play a county in the county championship from from Thursday to Monday, or from Monday to Thursday, whatever, and then you play the T20 Blast game on the Friday, then actually you've got 5 days in the week they're playing, but you only have the 2 travel days back and forth. That would be one way, but players don't want that because of the switching between formats. And so I guess the thing is that you have to, you either have to lose some cricket or extend the season somehow.
And losing cricket is really tough, right? So counties won't want fewer Blast games because, especially if the ones that don't have 100 venues, the revenue they get from Blast games is so important. You can't, when there are so many other financial challenges facing counties at the moment, you can't take away such a significant revenue generator.
Yeah.
And then with a county championship, I know that people point to other countries which have fewer games in their first class season, but it rains more here. Yeah. If you have a 10-game season, for example, if you have the sort of, I know people say we started this season earlier than usual. For a start, it's not that much earlier than it's been for the last 15 years, by the way. It's been pretty similar, maybe a week difference. You do just get periods in the summer that rain more than other periods. So if you only had a 10-game summer, suddenly players might only be playing really 8 games, and then you get an injury, and then suddenly you're missing half the season. So I think 14 games is quite important. Yeah,
I mean, my solution would still be, I think, 12 county championship games somehow, but I do appreciate everything you're saying. The other thing that is a possibility is to take some of it overseas, to start with 2 county rounds in, the Caribbean or something, and
It's like when Coronation Street goes to Spain or something like that, you know.
Yeah, but that
I'd like to see the survey results on that from County Pros. I guess that would cost a lot of money.
Yes, and again, you have the issue with county members who are like, hang on. I mean, some of them would love it. Some would be like, hang on, I've got a membership and now I'm not able to go to my home ground to watch my county.
Surely cheaper to get them all with a coach that just takes them all over the place, right? I mean, England, the UK isn't that big a country. I mean, it is. It's only sort of 2 or 3 hours between everywhere. There must be a way that they could do it. Yeah. No, I'm not criticising. I'm sure they've looked into this, but there must be a way of working smarter so that if they are playing in Bristol, you know, they're going to, you know, somewhere on the west side of the country rather than trolling across to the other way or up north or down south.
Well, we won't. As Katya said, we're not going to come up with a solution today.
I reckon if we kick it around for 15 more minutes.
The only thing, I do sometimes wonder whether we always moan about playing early in April, as you said. I don't understand why we don't play more in September and October, because with the climate changing as it is, September, October is usually better weather than early April. And if you added on that as well as the early April instead, I've always felt like you can get more cricket in if you extended the season.
Yeah, I mean, given how early we start, I wouldn't be against finishing a week later.
Maybe let's start. Should we start arguing about why we changed the clocks back? Should we scrap that? Throw that in the mix. You know, I know the farmers. It won't be popular with the farming guys, but you know, then we'll get some crucial daylight in October, play into November.
Related to all this, a bit of news that I guess isn't headline news in the UK yet, but I think will be part of discussions next summer and will be a very significant part of the 2025 summer, is that the Pakistan Super League, because of the Champions Trophy taking place in the usual PSL slot in Pakistan, the PSL is going to take place most likely exactly when the IPL takes place. The officials in Pakistan say they are going to coexist with the IPL rather than compete with the IPL. But it's being reported that the PSL will, one, have more money, but also a lot of the overseas players at the PSL are English players who don't play in the IPL. So there could be quite a significant impact on the quality of cricket you see in the first few weeks of the season, given that it's likely, you know, players like James Vint, Liam Dawson, etc., Hampshire are likely to be involved in the PSL. Counties could have a difficult decision to make over player availability, etc., etc.
And also the players are going to have to make those decisions too, right? Because something's got to give. And if we're getting to the stage now where the calendar year has cricket on it all the time in different formats. And, you know, that they will, I saw that Zach Crawley interview with Atherton and Nasser Hussain on Sky yesterday, talking after the Lancs match. And he was saying, you know, he wants to give white ball cricket more of a go. He's been concentrating on red ball cricket, and, you know, now he obviously feels a bit more secure in red ball cricket at the top of the order after the summer he had last year, and now white ball cricket then. So you know, a lot of players will want to do it all and think that they can do it all, but then maybe we will see this more segregation of I'm purely a T20 player, I'm purely a 4-day player, or whatever it is.
And I'm sure that some of the resistance from players is in part a consequence of how much cricket a lot of them play over the winter. You know, if you're a white ball specialist English player, and I know there aren't that many of them, your gap in the year is actually April and May when the red ball players are playing the county championship. Anyway, in the county championship there was an extremely fun low scoring game between Somerset and Essex at Taunton. So Somerset won this by 3 wickets in a game where no side scored 200 in an innings. Nasser Hussain on Sky said it looked like the groundsman had lost his lawnmower. I found this game fascinating because it's the absolute antithesis of the first 2 rounds of the Kookaburra Ball. It was gripping to watch, very entertaining, and in many ways really high quality cricket, but just not what you really see in Test cricket. You don't really get pictures like that. And although you had a lot of high quality bowling there, it was closer to 76, 77 mile per hour than 85, 86. And as a result, batters had to do some pretty funky things to combat the movement that was on offer. Before I go to you guys, we had a really interesting email from Simon, who watched a lot of this game. He said, there's no question that the wicket was green and did more than usual, but it was not excessive. It was consistent throughout, and coupled with the overhead conditions on day one, there were proven quality seamers all bending their back, bowling 80 miles per hour on a wicket offering pace and carry. There was noticeably less in the pitch when bowlers dropped their pace to low 70s, where batting looked much easier. Slips were brought into play with a decent carry, and there were superb takes by both teams. elements of captaincy from and planning from both sides, e.g. the leg slip and the way Elgar was dismissed in the second innings was a joy to see. The way Somerset learnt and adapted their approach in the second innings was a factor that decided the game. They showed the best elements of Bazball, not slogging, instead taking every advantage to play positively and score on a challenging wicket, playing good cricket shots and not allowing bowlers to settle into their groove. The Surrey Somerset game earlier this year was a great game on a flat deck with a Kookaburra ball, and this game was equally enthralling, showcasing different skills in the need for quality cricketers to be able to adapt to all conditions and not just play shots on flat tracks. I'm not asking for every pitch to be like this one. I'm purely arguing that some variation in pitches help develop and showcase players' skills whilst providing an entertaining game. Ben, what did you make of that game?
Yeah, well, it's interesting you say that you don't get pitches at all like this in Test cricket, because just occasionally you do. Like we've had the shortest test in the history of the game came early this year on a pitch that, but at 5-10 miles an hour quicker from all the bowlers.
If you looked at a compilation of the wickets in those two games, they don't look that similar.
Yeah, that is true. But you do get the occasional real bowler friendly surface, and I do like watching a game where, in that tour of India, it's different. But that pitch that was used for the fourth test that kind of had kind of crazy characteristics that were changed throughout the day, and you couldn't quite tell what it was going to next. That was great, and it was great that it kind of became a character in that game. And I guess all of this, the chat about the Dukes versus the Kookaburra ball, about this kind of game is like, it's kind of about what do you see the purpose of county cricket and the county championship as, and what do the guys in charge see it as well? Is it enough if it provides entertainment to a decent number of people, even if that entertainment happens to counteract the needs of the England team? Is there a way to balance both? I like to think that there probably is, and that also the likes of Sam Cook, of the other players who will be James Rue, for example, that they will still learn something from this game, and that actually batters who are raised just on playing on flat tracks against a Kookaburra ball, or bowlers who only ever are learning to bowl with that, and not you need to be able to get the most out of a surface when it's at its most helpful, as well as find ways of counteracting a surface that isn't offering you much. Those are both important skills. I like to think that there is a balance that can be struck, but and so the pitch inspectors may well have a look at this, but I didn't mind it, and it was quite refreshing after a start season which has not had many results, I guess.
No, definitely agree. Elsewhere in Division 1, Kent won a championship game at Old Trafford for the first time in 27 years. Lancashire were bowled out for 92 in their first innings. Nathan Gilchrist taking 6 for 24 for Kent. Lancashire are bottom of the table, nearly a third of the way through the season. What's going on at Lancs? Who wants to take this one?
I'll take it. I guess the Lancashire thing is interesting because a lot of people would have had them as kind of contenders going into the start of the season. So it's quite a surprise that they are as bad as they have been. I think when you add up the Kookaburra no results combined with the near washout they had against Surrey, when other teams were racking up batting bonus points, they weren't necessarily doing that. You can also look at the impacts. So when they've done well previously, Keaton Jennings particularly has gone big in throughout the season, and he's had one big century, and the rest of the time he hasn't passed 50. Their batting has been really, really unstable. They've had a lot of middle order collapses. I think they've made potentially one 400 plus score this season. Probably getting that wrong, but I think
that's right, and I think they went several innings in a row not passing 200.
Yeah, exactly. And I think also when you look at their bowling, it hasn't been as effective as other bowlers in the start of the season, especially once the Duke ball has come back in. Their batting has been so brittle that hasn't allowed them to have any runs on the board to play with. But it is surprising. I guess there's an element of, as well, there was so much noise coming into the season with Nathan Lyon playing for them that hasn't necessarily been the decisive factor that it could have been. And also now that they've lost Lyon, and then, well, not now, but they will lose Lyon earlier than they thought they were going to lose Lyon. There's an element of that as well. So they're going to struggle to come back and pick it up from here, but it is very surprising what's happened to them over the start of the season.
Well, the Nathan Lyon thing, they're just not putting enough runs on the board to sort of get him into the game. They're not been the sort of games that you bring in an overseas spinner for, even though it was actually turning quite a lot at Old Trafford towards the end of that game. But you're right to say just that the batting has just not done its job, really. So Tom Bruce the New Zealander overseas player with an outstanding first-class record. He's averaging 10 in the middle order.
That Jennings ton is the only ton anyone's scored for them so far this season.
Yeah, exactly.
And when does Lyon have to go now?
He's only playing half of the games,
Okay.
and he's already played a handful of them.
Yeah. So Lancs fans, I think it's fair to say, were not overjoyed by the appointment of Dale Benkenstein as head coach, which I thought was a bit interesting because he had a stint as batting coach in 2021, and they were one of the better batting sides in the country that season, and got to the Bob Willis Trophy final then, I think. But he didn't have a great track record at Gloucestershire, and a Gloucestershire side that he took over when they were in the ascendancy, I guess. Rich Dawson had done a good job there, and that work was not carried on. I mean, I don't think not worth going into the ins and outs of it, and we don't know, who was responsible for that there. But I think that some of the names that were being thrown around the Lancs job, and if they look around and say, Yorkshire have a proven international coach, Otis Gibson, even the likes of Derbyshire of Mickey Arthur. Actually, if you're at the head coach job of one of the biggest counties in the country, that is a very plum coaching job that should have a lot of contenders going in. The likes of Jonathan Trott was being in the mix, or was being mentioned in dispatches at least, and then it's Benson that comes in. So they weren't happy at that point, and this will only increase that pressure. I guess the other thing, we talked about the PSL earlier, and the impact that will have on the county season. Lancashire are one of the more lenient counties in terms of allowing their players to go to the IPL at quite short notice, I guess. So Surrey have clauses in their contracts that say to players, beyond this date, you can't sign a replacement player because you're a Surrey player, so you're going to do that. Whereas Lancashire lost Phil Salt quite shortly out from the season. He would have bolstered that batting line, which has really struggled. You look at it as well. It's funny because you look at, if you could pick a best Lancashire 11, you'd think it would contend with anyone in the country, but
haven't come close to actually putting that
exactly.
out so often. Luke Wood as well, losing him. And a big part of their struggles this season is that as good as Bailey and Williams have been for them over a long period of time, Bailey's had a really difficult start to the season. They're not able to rotate their bowling attack in the same way the best teams in the country do. And Sakeem Mahmood is reportedly going to be available next week for his first appearance in a very long time. But Luke Wood's obviously been in the IPL as well, so they've been short of much of their best talent.
No James Anderson either. In Division 2, Sussex were the only side to win, doing so by an innings against Derbyshire. They do look very good. Jaden Seals looks a real handful, leading with taker in Div 2. He took a second innings, 5 for. He's bowling quickly. So Sussex are runaway leaders at the moment in Division 2. That result means, Jim, that Derbyshire are winless.
Why turning to me?
And Derbyshire, Glamorgan and Gloucestershire, the three teams remain winless. Those three teams, between them, have won one of their last 55 Division 2 games. And we had a message in from a Derbyshire fan sincerely asking what the point of Derbyshire is at the moment. So Matt wrote in, this is I think it's very interesting given the conversation we're having at the moment. It feels wrong on so many levels to ask this as a long-suffering Derbyshire supporter, but right now, given the general climate of county cricket and Derbyshire's never-ending failures, I can't help but ponder, what is the point of counties like mine? Realistically, the top echelons of county cricket are closing faster than ever, and with the end of seemingly another fall storm drawing near, it's difficult to muster enthusiasm. Granted, Derbyshire don't help themselves with a lack of player production, meaning we don't have that as a comfort blanket. Maybe it's just me on a bad day, and 25 years of scarce returns have taken their toll, but I can't help myself. Beyond the never-ending brilliance of Wade Madsen, realistically, what is the viable future for my county? Jim, as a Derbyshire man yourself,
yep,
does that resonate with you? Is there hope?
Was that Matt, was it?
Yeah.
I think Matt's just having a bad week, isn't he? Well, I can see where he's coming from. Derbyshire are often looked upon as the sort of the poor, ugly duckling sort of thing. They do, sometimes they don't help themselves with their player production, but they do have a loyal core of players. I was really gutted when Critchley left a few years ago because he had come through. I think he was Lancashire originally, but he'd sort of come through the youth system there. And they do, they've got, as Ben said, they've got Mickey Arthur. They've got good people there. They're just a small county, and they probably, when those players do get better, they are sort of blinded by the bright lights of Notts or or Essex or whatever. But yeah, I mean, going back to the whole thing of what is county cricket for? Is it for entertainment? Is it to feed? I mean, I don't think there's been an English Test cricketer from Derbyshire since maybe Dominic Cork. Used to have Devon Malcolm, Michael Holding before that. Used to have it's sort of Derbyshire have sort of gone down the pegging a little bit over the years, and they've not won a lot of silverware. I think they won the county championship, but I know this actually. Do you know when they last won the county championship?
I have no idea.
1936.
Wow.
Yeah, so they've won it once, and have not won a great deal of silverware. I think maybe since 1990 was their last trophy in a major competition. So Matt and other Derbyshire fans have been starved of any of that stuff. But as any fan of any club will tell you, like, it's not necessarily about the silverware. I guess if you can see improvement and you can see a good vibe and a certain atmosphere about the place that perhaps has been lacking recently. I always plump for whenever they do the sort of like magazine pick your team for that. I always stick in a few Derbyshire players. That whole thing of like tempting fate, or saying, oh, maybe this year will be their year where they'll do a Leicester City sort of thing or whatever, and it's never quite happened. But yeah, in short, I don't really know what the answer is.
Yeah, I think that stat is more sounds more alarming than it actually is. It actually is a trend across Division 2, not just this season, but last season as well. Very few teams actually win games. There are a lot of draws in Division 2. So those teams, even though they're winless over the last season and a third, I don't think they've actually lost that many games, those three teams individually. So I think there's a broader question about the sort of cricket being played in Division 2.
Yeah. But for Derbyshire specifically, I guess it's where do they go? Who do they get in? How do they attract players? How do they improve their youth setup so they're actually producing homegrown players that other counties are? There's all those sorts of existential questions. But as I say, they do have a great coach and they've got really good players, as Matt mentioned. They need more. They need a bigger talent squad. I mean, have you been to Chesterfield and watched a day of outground cricket at Chesterfield underneath the Crooked Spire? I mean, what more could you want in life? But maybe that's what Matt needs to do, get down and on a sunny day and watch a bit of that, because, I'm sure a lot of the smaller counties have these troubles as well. It's hard not to feel like you're the poor relation in terms of when you look at Surrey or Essex or some of the bigger sides. But yeah, maybe Matt's just needs a day in the sun underneath the Crooked Spire.
I think we could all do that. England women announced their squad for the upcoming series against Pakistan. The headline stories are that Sophia Dunkley has been left out of both groups, while Tammy Beaumont is only in the ODI squad. Maya Bouchier, who had an outstanding recent tour of New Zealand, is set to get an extended run at the top of the order. Katya, it feels like England are closing in on the group that they want for the T20 World Cup later this year, which is a good place to be at 6 months out from the World Cup.
Yeah, I was looking at the kind of what the 11 could be before we started recording, and that top 6 now looks pretty kind of nailed on for what it's going to be for the T20 World Cup. Before New Zealand, we were talking about that Dunkley Beaumont straight shootout, and what it turned into was more a game of like musical chairs, where there was one chair and Sophia Dunkley, Beaumont and Bouchier made sure she was firmly sat down on that chair at the end of the series, and will probably stay there for the World Cup, regardless of what she does.
Not that much cricket left, right? So
there's five T20s against Pakistan, 5 against New Zealand, something like that. 3 T20s against Pakistan, 5 against New Zealand. So there's not that much left before they're going to name that squad. The one thing I was thinking about was if, let's say, one of Danny Wyatt or Maya Bouchier gets an injury that puts them out of the T20 World Cup, which one of Dunkley or Beaumont is in like ahead in the pecking order to replace them? And at the minute, I think you'd potentially have to say that it's Beaumont, given what she's actually done in T20s over the last year, that she's still playing in the ODIs, and that Dunkley's been left out of both squads. I wouldn't like to put any money on that, but I would probably say that it's Beaumont.
Yeah, it's worth saying that although Beaumont and Dunkley aren't in this squad, for the T20 squad, that's not because they're completely out of the picture. It's that they're not on the 11, and John Lewis wanted them to be playing cricket rather than sat at the bench, given how experienced they are.
Yeah, and there's plenty of regional cricket to be playing, and even if they're not playing against New Zealand as well, there'll be 100 cricket and proper cricket for them to be playing outside the squad. So it's not, this is absolutely the door slam closed. This is just, please go and get some runs and then we'll reconsider. So I was looking at that top 6 and it looks pretty nailed on. And then the 7 below it, the 5 below it from 7 to 11, you've probably got 3 spinners in Glenn, Dean and Eccleston, and then 2 bowlers, one of which will probably be Lauren Bell. And then in that kind of number 7 spot, that's the last spot they're needing to fill, and that's what they'll be doing over the course of this summer. So you've probably got Danny Gibson, Freya Kemp, potentially Mahika Gore, although John Lewis said in the announcement for the squad that she is finishing her A-levels, and once she's finished her A-levels, then they'll take a view on her immediate future with that. So you've got that spot, which is now the focus for them to fill over this summer. So Freya Kemp will be playing the upcoming series, but she will only be playing as a batter because she had what was described as a flare-up of her back injury that she got over a year ago now in the West Indies. So whether she can bowl in T20s by the end of the summer, I think that will be the view on whether she's retained for the T20 World Cup, because Danny Gibson was bowling so much at the death in New Zealand. But yeah, it does feel like they've pretty much nailed on most of who they want in that team. And now it's that last spot and the peripheral players that they'll be looking at who they want to take with them as cover.
There's another interesting element from the squad announcement. Coach John Lewis said that England used AI to help make one of their selections last summer against Australia. He said, I can send multiple different lineups to the company and they run, I think it's about 250,000 simulations per team that I send with all the different permutations that could happen through the game. Ben, what should we make of this? AI selecting Ashes 11s?
Yeah, I don't know, because also with these kind of things, you're always not sure like how high tech it actually is, or how high tech John Lewis kind of thinks it is, especially when you just like.
Do you think he's being scammed?
Well, no, but especially when you just like slap a big number in there, like loads of computing stuff has big numbers. When you think about how much like a megabyte is, that is so many bits. But like, it's not as if that's
good stuff.
That sounds like So to some extent, I don't think this is like revolutionary. Exactly, I don't think this is England doing something that is totally unheard of to other teams. And AI, it's not that it's overselling it, but I don't think he's putting into ChatGPT, who should I pick for the Ashes, and it's saying get Charlie Dean, and it's more like it's running simulations, and that kind of stuff is kind of interesting because you can talk about like it's almost a bit like game theory in mathematics, where if you have what a certain percentage of so if you say you have,
you're gonna have to explain this one.
So this is more like with I see it more in baseball, but you can think of it in cricket, where if you think you have, say, 4 different types of delivery, and the batter you're up against has, a different percentage of likelihood of hitting each one, but if they set themselves for one, then they have a different percentage likelihood of hitting each one. So you have lots of different bits of information there. You can then create kind of optimal strategies for how often you should bowl each different type of ball, basically, and then just do that kind of at random, but following the percentages kind of thing. And then I can see how a similar sort of thing fills into a simulation type thing, where you think like, okay, this batter might really struggle against off spin or tall off spin or whatever, but you can use a simulation to actually think like, how often is that scenario going to crop up in a game? Because you might think you might be overplaying certain bits of information and underplaying other bits of information, and the simulation can maybe help you weed out which bits are important and which aren't, kind of thing. And it seems like the bit of the selection they made was to pick Charlie Dean and also possibly to bowl her with the new ball, and then she did get Alyssa Healy out with the new ball in one of the games. So that would be, if that is a selection, then that would be a win for it, I guess.
Well, saying that Lewis said it was a successful use of it, and I guess if it wasn't, he wouldn't have said he used it.
It's weird that he mentioned it, I thought.
He was asked. He was asked.
Oh, was he asked specifically about it?
It was mentioned in a Forbes, a story in Forbes, and
right.
then I'm not sure I got into there, but then someone read that, I think.
Someone's leaking that he's just putting his feet up and putting it all into ChatGPT. Yeah.
Well, he got
Weirdly, we want to pick Betty Snowball this week. That's what the algorithm says.
But he also said that like it was used in rugby and in football as well. I'm probably going to get the team wrong, but Wigan potentially, Wigan rugby as well, I think.
Yeah.
So it's not a necessarily totally revolutionary thing that with sport. It's just its application to cricket and how beneficial that is in terms of selection. He also said that it was a factor in selection, not the whole picture.
Yeah.
Otherwise, he's doing himself out of a job. Sure.
But we get an AI cricket coach.
But also people not to delve into AI chat, but AI has been around for ages and exists in multiple forms. So like if you play a computer game in the early 2000s, if you're playing against the computer, that is AI.
Mm.
So it's not as if everything is, as Ben says, the evil ChatGPT taking over the world sort of stuff.
So you're basically saying John Lewis is using FIFA to select the England team?
How different is it to International Cricket Captain 2002? I'd love to know.
Derbyshire still didn't win that year.
We have an exciting announcement, by the way. From later this week, we will be launching a weekly podcast on women's cricket. Myself, Katya, and new Wisden signing, Lauren Winfield-Hill, will put together a weekly show that gets stuck into the bigger stories in the women's game, as well as some stories that haven't had as much attention as they should. It's very exciting. We've got some big plans lined up. And our first episode, we kick things off with an interview with England captain Heather Knight about her 8 years at the helm. Here's a sneak preview of what to expect. This is Heather Knight on Angela Merkel. Out of interest, who are the non-cricket sporting leaders that you look to?
Good question. I can't think of any off the top of my head. Like Angela, this sounds like really boring, but like Angela Merkel, like kind of how she's done stuff for Germany. Yeah, just the sort of no fuss people like Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Do you know who that is, Lozzie?
No, I'm looking through
No.
heads here. I'm like, who are these people? I was thinking,
Sorry, they're just people that popped into my head.
like the hockey team or something like that. No, we did a bit of work.
Oh yeah, Kate Richardson. Well,
yeah. That was someone that I thought of a little bit.
I
Yeah,
find
definitely.
I find that fascinating, Heather, because those are not answers I think many cricketers would give.
Thanks to look up the blank look on my face.
I'm trying to make myself sound intelligent here, aren't I? Got to pick some world leaders, I guess.
I was going to say I did not expect an Angela Merkel reference on the first podcast. That pod will appear in your feed later this week. Elsewhere in the women's game this week, two brilliant finishes in the Rachel Hayhoe Flint Trophy. So the Diamonds beat the Sparks by 1 run over the weekend, and then Thunder beat the Blaze by 1 wicket yesterday. I was watching the end of the Thunder win, and the streaming numbers with Ben, we were both watching this in the office, were not only really good, but were like comfortably higher than almost every county championship men's game that you'd see. Mm-hmm. So like, it is important that these games are streamed, because actually it's not just that people watch them when the games are good. Actually, more people watch them than the men's stuff that's
Were they on there long before it was going down to a 1-ball finish as well? It wasn't a case of, this is going
more
right,
people watching it at the end,
yeah,
sure,
yeah.
but still the numbers
yeah.
are healthy.
There were more people watching that than I think watching when Brooke and Root were batting together for Yorkshire, for example.
Yeah.
And I mean that stream did also go down for a bit, so it shows that the value of having a robust stream as well, I guess. But yeah, no, it's great to have these things streamed, and I do, because it's none of these numbers are sort of they're decent sized chunks, but not huge chunks. You do feel like there is some really high quality cricket on show, both in the County Championship and in the Rachel Hayhoe Flint, comparable to. You get the players that you see at the international level that you know and love, and I know speaking on this podcast is kind of going to be preaching to the converted, but like I feel like there has to be a way to let people know that you really like these international cricketers. They also play this other stuff, and you can watch it for free. And it doesn't quite get across, even though the numbers are improving and encouraging, and the streams are of good quality. So
I do wonder how much the tier 1 stuff has brought into more people's consciousness that there are these regional competitions that you can watch.
100%, because I think they're being talked about closer to the counties that they will eventually be.
Exactly. And just on like the players that you're watching, I think in that Thunder game there was Tammy Beaumont, Sarah Glenn, Kirsty Gordon, Emma Lamb, Sophie Eccleston, Kate Cross, Mahika Gore, and other 100 players in England under 19 players. So there's such a density. Like having 8 regional teams does mean that the talent is so densely kind of concentrated that if you do switch on a Blaze game or a Vipers game or a Diamonds game, then you are going to see very high quality international cricketers.
The end of that Diamonds game, by the way, was totally mad. So the Sparks needed 4 runs off the last over with 3 wickets in hand, and then 2 runs off the last 2 balls with 2 wickets in hand, and ended up being bowled out 1 run short of the target. There's a great still on Lauren's Instagram page of the moment at which the Diamonds win and take that last wicket. Worth finding that finish on YouTube if you can. Elsewhere, Scotland have qualified for the 10-team T20 World Cup later this year, beating Ireland in a playoff to seal qualification alongside Sri Lanka. Scotland restricted Ireland to 110 for 9 from their 20 overs. Catherine Bryce took 4 for 8 before scoring 35 not out to take her country over the line, with her sister Sarah at the other end. It's the first time Scotland have qualified for a Women's World Cup in either white ball format. Ben, Scotland in a 10-team World Cup is a really big deal, and Catherine Bryce obviously a huge part of the reason why they're there.
Yeah, I mean, because, you know, you want to focus on the wider Scotland story, but it's just a ridiculous effort from her, basically. So they were beaten by Sri Lanka, and given the nature of these competitions, it's you know, what one win leaves you with no margin for error. And since then, she has not had any, she's not made any errors, basically. She's made, I think about 150 of the 130 balls without being dismissed in the next 3 games, including against Thailand, who would have been probably just about favourites ahead of Scotland to go through, or they'd have been at least to go through to the semis in that group. And then also taken something like 8 for 39 with the ball across 11 overs, which is kind of freakish. I mean, she was the ICC Women's Associate Cricketer of the Decade for the 2010s, and she won that award at the age of 22 or 23, I think. And do you think the only thing that's going to stop her winning it for this decade is that Scotland might now be, but you know, this will bolster their claims to being a full member side, I guess. And yeah, I mean, what a moment it has to have been for her as well to hit the winning runs alongside her sister Sarah, after they've been playing these events since 2015, when Sarah was 15, Catherine was 17. You do still feel for Ireland, and I think that these events keep highlighting how actually the gap is not that big. I mean, Sri Lanka were the other side to qualify. They beat UAE, and you think about, you know, what we talked about Sri Lanka recently, that Chamari Atapatu is, you know, one of the kind of the greats of the modern game, and they were, you know, UAE were within 15 runs of knocking them out, of Chamari Atapatu not being at a World Cup. Thailand were one of the stories of the 2020 event and didn't even make it to the last 4. Ireland are a full member side, a professional side, and, you know, a good side, and we're just beaten by another good side after a top order collapse, which, you know, it feels like a very harsh way for, you know, a lot of your plans to be kind of set back. It's going to go to 12 teams from 2026, but it feels like it can support 14 teams. And actually, you wonder if, looking at this, you know, like that group that UAE and Ireland progressed from was just very competitive. We had Vanuatu beating Zimbabwe. We had Netherlands, UAE, Zimbabwe, Vanuatu all taking games off each other. That's like, the World Cup is about those teams getting their chance on the big stage as much as it is about finding out who the best team in the world is.
Yeah,
so.
Absolutely.
From an Ireland perspective as well, it's just worth remembering that in the last World Cup, just before it, they beat Australia in a warm-up game. And then less than 18 months later, they've been knocked out of the qualifier, and they're not going to be at the next World Cup. So yeah, it's also worth remembering how kind of the cycle has worked for Ireland, and it's not really worked, especially with it being a 10-team tournament.
No, definitely. And I think, yeah, I also think that just the quality of qualifying tournaments like this just made me think the absurdity of having 10-team World Cups. Clearly, matches between the teams who are there or thereabouts in terms of qualification are good matches. You see, the Sri Lanka example is a good one. Sri Lanka nearly doesn't qualify for this World Cup, yet we know can take games off the best teams in the world. And if they missed out on this World Cup, that would have been totally absurd. Some men's T20 World Cup news. Jake Fraser-McGurk is not in the Australia squad. Neither is Steve Smith. There's actually quite a good interview with Fraser-McGurk that's doing the rounds at the moment, where he outlines very sensibly why it made sense not for him to be picked. So if you're wondering why Jake's not been picked, hear from Jake himself.
Yeah, but I saw that, and I saw Josh Hazelwood as well. Josh Hazelwood saying like, well, who'd you leave out? And Jake saying like, well, I haven't earned the spot. And that just seems like...
Who would you leave out?
Well, I'd leave out, you know, like, I'd pick him over David Warner right now. Like,
really?
Yeah, like I think that you don't... Yeah.
Fraser-McGurk has never played a game in the Caribbean.
Yeah, but I think I don't think you want to look at international selection in terms of like earning a spot or someone having to do loads to get dropped. I think you just look at a guy who is like, you know, like, or the guys who kind of their sole job is to pick the teams to do these things, that they are picking Fraser-McGurk over other players.
What would the AI selector do, do you think? Feed it in. McGurk's in.
I don't feel that strongly about it. It was more the reasoning just felt like a little bit like you're selecting safe there, and that's quite a feature of international selection, which I think you don't see in the franchise world, just a bit more cutthroat. And in that cutthroat world, Fraser-McGurk has risen above other players. But yeah,
Is he just biding his time, just being a nice guy then, saying, "Hey, look, I didn't expect to be picked."
To be
and all that
fair,
sort of stuff?
it would have been bold for a 22, 23-year-old to throw his toys out the pram about not getting picked for a World Cup.
No one would
when
do
he's
that.
yet-
No one would do that in a cricket team, right? Yes?
Well, no, they wouldn't. And this is a guy who's not yet played T20I cricket for Australia either.
But he's having a great few weeks.
He's hitting them well.
Yeah, he's hitting them well.
On players hitting them well, the IPL is still happening. We are approaching the end of the group stage. Sunil Narine, over a month into the tournament, is still the leading run scorer among overseas players. He scored another ridiculous knock this week, 81 off 39. And I know he's opened in the past, but this is totally on a different level from anything we've seen from him, Ben. What's happened? Why is it happening? And make it make sense.
So, I mean, to be honest, I think the most decisive, the most important factor is that he is a very talented ball striker who is in the form of his life, basically. I think, but there are a few specific facts about this tournament. One is that the batting conditions in terms of the pitches have been really good, and he is a player who will benefit more from that than other players because he is such a one gear type of player. That's his role. And so if the pitches actually allow you to swing through the line and it's not going to move too much either way, that's going to benefit Sunil Narine more than other players. His partnership, when he succeeded in the past in the IPL, that was when he had a really good partnership with Chris Lynn, and they had a real sort of like, Chris Lynn would really attack pace and Narine would destroy spin. So they would often...
That was the history of why Narine first opened, right? It's because Lynn had that vulnerability.
Yeah.
And Narine was so good against it. It meant that Lynn got more bowling, faced more bowling that suited his batting, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a similar thing going with Phil Salt. Like, Phil Salt he's got a pretty good strike rate against both pace and spin, but it's particularly against pace's strength. So you get a bit of that working out. But then also I think Narine has improved his game against fast bowling as well. I think particularly against short fast bowling, he's sort of figured out a way to survive and score runs against it.
People used to say that. People used to say, he's a great ball striker, but if you pitch it short and at his throat or whatever, as a lot of batsmen, they don't like it there.
Yeah.
But he's improved at that.
And I think because that weakness was so obvious, teams didn't plan beyond that. So now that Narine actually has, now that's not just like a go-to fail-safe approach against him, then actually you find yourself short of ideas quite quickly, or just going back to that again and again and not knowing what to do once that's not working, kind of thing. So it is interesting, but he's not coming back for the T20 World Cup, even though there were some efforts made to convince him. I think he's happy enough just going and smashing it for KKR and bowling some darts each day. But yeah,
Jim, you've ventured into the world of substacking.
Of the IPL.
Not the IPL, substacking.
Yes.
What is substacking first?
Well, I thought it was quite a new thing, but apparently it's not. It's been around for ages. It's basically a hosting platform, right, for writing or podcasts or whatever it might be. And what is ours? Ours is basically a home for. So ours is me and John Houghton, I should say, the cricket writer who I'm very much holding onto the coattails of. But he often writes about the game from different angles or different points of view, and maybe that's something I've tried to do over the past few years. And so this is a place where we can write about stuff or talk about stuff that perhaps, or go into detail on stuff. There's no word limit, for example. If you do a piece for a newspaper or even the magazine, it's great that you get a few more words, but you don't get so many. And so it's sort of a platform for that, and to just dig into cricket's hinterlands or things that tickle our fancy that perhaps no right thinking mainstream media person would publish. But it's a good it's not a dumping ground. I don't want to say that, but it's a good place for ideas and for creativity. And so we just started it, so there's about 10 pieces up there, and we hope to do a podcast and things.
And there's a piece on fielding.
Yeah. So John yesterday did a piece about how he hates fielding, and it's the worst thing ever in the world, and how he would just sort of slog through it in order to get the chance to bat, because he's inherently selfish batsman type, whereas I've always quite enjoyed fielding.
Have you really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And so I did a sort of counter piece today. It's like, what is it? Is it Drake and who is it? Drake and someone else who have got a spat at the minute.
Kendrick Lamar.
Sure, yeah. Houghton and Wallace are very much doing that in the cricket, not even the cricket media mainstream, just sort of
through the medium of long form writing.
The hinterlands, yeah. I did a thing about the joy of catching and fielding. Actually, maybe it's more about actual catching. Yeah, fielding is I guess you've got to be in the field to take a catch. But so it's that sort of stuff. It's called Arrangements of White on Green, which is suitably pretentious. I'm sure we'll stick a link up to it, and there'll be loads of subscribers.
And do you think this is the way that cricket media is going?
I don't think it's the way it's necessarily going, but I think it's an interesting subplot in that. One reason, being totally honest, that we wanted to do it is to have something that you own and that you're completely in control of. Often we're at the behest of editors or people commissioning you to do something, or following a certain news, whatever's in the news or whatever. And so this is very much, we can do what we want, and there's a certain attractiveness in that. It's also born out of, if you want to plow your own furrow a little bit or do something slightly different, then it's a space for that. It's a subscriber model, so people can read, and it's all free essentially. But if you wanted to chuck in a few coins, then that'll help us keep doing it, I suppose. And if you look at other projects that have done this, I don't know, like Jeff and Adam with the Final Word, or other sort of things where there's an audio element, there's perhaps a written element. Gideon Haigh does one in Australia, which we didn't copy him, but we were certainly talking about doing it when him and Sam Perry and a few others, Pete Lawler does stuff on that now as well. And if you've read that, that's great. It's Gideon and Pete talking about whatever's in their head that day or whatever. And it's a good, writing's a tool, so it's a good place to sort of flex your muscles a bit.
Well, fascinating. I've enjoyed what I've read so far, and we'll leave a link in the description.
Okay.
That is everything for today. Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Katya.
Quiz question.
Oh shit! The quiz question.
God, that could have been uproar.
That could have been
So presumably you've got 4 answers ready to go, Katya.
A reminder of the question, as this is Jim's 35th birthday. The question was, who are the 4 people who've scored 1,000 or more test runs in their 36th year on this planet? Any suggested answers?
Can I go first, as it is my big day?
It is your birthday, yeah.
Chris Rogers?
No.
That's what I was going to say.
Was it?
Yeah.
Any other answers?
Graham Gooch?
No.
Whoa.
I think a lot
Boycott.
I think a lot of these people have done well just more generally after their 35th birthday rather than in their 36th
That's comforting.
year.
Well, yesterday earlier I said Kumar Sangakkara, but he's not in there.
No.
Are there some really big names in there?
Pretty big, but
Pretty big.
Other people can do guesses, but Yunus Khan?
No.
Any English in there?
There's a name very close to Yunus Khan that you didn't get.
Maybe not close to Yunus Khan, but Chandapur?
No.
Oh, yeah.
Sounds like
Mohammed Yusuf?
No.
Close to Yunus Khan. But so the name is close to his.
No, it's in you picked
similar
great
era.
Pakistan middle order batters of the early noughties.
Okay.
It's the other one.
Inzamam?
Yeah.
Okay.
me and Inzi.
So I'm going to put you out of your misery because I don't think you can get them. So leaving the list, and I was actually genuinely quite surprised by this because I did not remember that he had this good an end to his career. Topis Ganguly scored 1,200 runs at 53, age 35.
Tops off on the balcony.
Then Inzamam scored 1,100 runs at exactly 80. Then the one I think one of you might have got, Khawaja, because it's just happened.
It just happened.
Khawaja 1,000 runs at 72. And then Zaheer Abbas 1,050 runs at 81. So as you enter your 36th year, Jim,
there's a lot of hope.
Just bear in mind Zaheer Abbas's 82-83 run spree as inspiration.
But I can't play on May the 11th.
You can't play on May 11th.
But once the pictures have dried out, I'm your man.
Cool.
Yeah.
Excellent. Good to know. That is everything for today. Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Katya. Thanks, Jim. That is everything for today's show. But remember, we've got our first episode of the Women's Weekly podcast starting on Thursday.
And live show? Still a couple tickets or not?
Still a couple of tickets, yeah.
Cool.